The day began like any other in the alien queen's world, a place of beauty and mystery that stretched far beyond the horizon. Colors shimmered in ways that humans could hardly imagine, and the skies glowed with soft, ever-changing hues. From her palace, which rose high above the ground like a crown of crystal and light, the queen watched over her people with care and attention. She had ruled wisely for many years, her voice carrying a calm authority, and her decisions were guided by both logic and deep empathy. Yet nothing could prepare her for the fear that now gripped her heart. Her daughter, the young princess, had vanished without a trace. One moment she had been playing in the palace gardens, chasing glowing petals that floated through the air like tiny lanterns. The next, she was gone. The servants and guards had searched everywhere, the palace, the surrounding forests, even the floating islands that hovered in the distance. But there was no sign of her. Panic had not yet taken over the queen, for she believed in hope and in the loyalty of those around her. Still, each passing hour without news deepened the fear gnawing at her heart. The queen's daughter was not just any child. She was curious and bright, with a kind heart that seemed to touch everyone she met. She often wandered to explore new things, always asking questions and seeking to understand the world around her. Her laughter had a melody that brought warmth to the palace halls, and her absence left a cold silence that even the most loyal servants could not fill. The queen, standing on the balcony of her chamber, tried to calm herself, breathing in slowly as she scanned the horizon. Somewhere out there, her daughter was waiting, and she would find her, she promised silently. News soon arrived, carried by a small, swift messenger drone that hovered with a gentle hum before landing on the balcony. The queen reached for it, her hands trembling slightly. The message was brief but clear. A human had been seen near the last known location of her daughter. The queen paused, her eyes narrowing as she considered the implications. Humans were rare visitors in her world. They came from a distant planet, far from the alien lands she ruled, and encounters with them were always unusual and unpredictable. Some humans were scholars, some explorers, and some were brave enough to step into situations that others would never dare. At first, the queen felt disbelief. Could a human really have anything to do with the disappearance of her child? And yet the messenger's reports were consistent. A human traveling alone had been seen moving through dangerous terrain, helping someone who appeared frightened and lost. The queen's mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps the human had rescued her daughter, or perhaps he was involved in some other way. Regardless, she could not ignore this lead. She needed to see for herself. The palace advisors urged caution. "Your Majesty," one said, bowing low, "humans are unpredictable. We do not know their intentions. It may be wiser to send a team of guards or spies to investigate before you risk your own safety." The queen shook her head gently. "I cannot wait," she replied. "Every moment my daughter is missing is a moment I cannot bear. I must go myself. I will not sit and hope while she waits for me." Her advisors exchanged worried glances, but they knew better than to argue when the queen's mind was made up. She moved with purpose, summoning the preparations for travel. As the queen descended from her crystal palace, the grounds of the kingdom were alive with activity. Courtiers, servants, and guards all hurried to ready her for the journey. Ships were prepared, sleek vessels that could soar through both sky and space, equipped with protective fields and energy shields. The queen chose a small, fast craft that could navigate difficult terrain, one she could pilot herself if needed. She wore simple clothing, practical for travel, though it still bore the elegance of her royal status. Her expression was calm, but her heart beat fast with worry. The queen's journey began with a descent from the floating islands to the lower lands, where forests and rivers stretched endlessly. She kept her eyes open for any sign of her daughter, scanning the landscape. As she traveled, every shadow, every rustle of leaves made her pulse quicken. The world she ruled was vast and filled with wonders, but also with dangers. Wild creatures roamed the forests, some curious and harmless, others potentially deadly. The queen moved. With grace and alertness, her senses heightened, remembering the lessons she had learned over her years of rule. As she flew further, she thought about her daughter's favorite spots, the meadows where luminous flowers grew, the waterfalls that sparkled in sunlight, and the quiet groves where the princess liked to read and play. She remembered the child's laughter, the way she had hugged her mother tightly before running off to explore. The queen felt a sharp ache in her heart, but it fueled her determination. She would not rest until her daughter was safe and back in her arms. Night fell, but the queen's craft glowed softly, illuminating the path ahead. She paused only briefly to observe the stars, which shone brightly in the alien sky. They reminded her of the vastness of the universe, and yet also of the connections that could exist between worlds. Perhaps this human, unknown and distant, was one such connection, a bridge that might lead her to her daughter. She could not know yet whether the human was friend or foe, but she resolved to remain open-minded. Trust could be given cautiously, but hope must never be abandoned. Finally, the queen reached the area where the human had reportedly been seen. The terrain was rough, filled with jagged rocks and thick forests. It was a place few dared to enter, yet she moved forward with steady determination. There, in the dim light of the alien night, she saw faint traces, footprints, signs of movement, and the telltale marks of someone guiding another through the wilderness. Her heart leapt. Perhaps her daughter had been found after all. Perhaps she was safe. The queen paused, listening to the sounds of the night, the whisper of leaves, the distant call of nocturnal creatures, and something else, the soft sound of voices. One was clearly human, the other smaller, higher, and distinctly her daughter's. She strained to hear, her heart pounding as relief and anxiety mixed together. The queen's mind raced with questions. How had the human found her daughter? Was she safe? And would her daughter recognize her immediately? Or had the fear and confusion of her disappearance changed her? As the voices grew closer, the queen could see them emerging from the shadowed trees. There, walking carefully, was a man unlike anyone she had ever met. He moved with careful attention, glancing around as if aware of the dangers that surrounded him. Beside him was her daughter, her eyes wide and bright, but her small hand firmly held by the human. The child looked tired and anxious, but unharmed. The queen felt tears prick her eyes. Relief, gratitude, and wonder mingled in her chest. For a moment, the queen remained hidden, observing the interaction. The human spoke softly, reassuring her daughter, pointing out safe paths, and encouraging her gently. The princess, once shy and hesitant, seemed to respond with trust, clinging to him as though she knew he would not let anything harm her. The queen realized then the depth of this human's courage and kindness. Here was someone who had crossed worlds and risked the unknown to protect her child, without seeking reward or recognition. The queen stepped forward then, revealing herself. The human's eyes widened in surprise, but he did not falter. He released the princess's hand just enough for her to run toward her mother. The child's voice rang out, calling, "Mom!" And the queen caught her daughter in her arms, holding her tightly. The warmth, the familiarity, the relief, it was all overwhelming. She looked at the human, bowing slightly, gratitude shining in her eyes. Words were not enough to express what she felt. He had returned what she feared was lost forever. Though the reunion was joyful, the queen remained mindful. She needed to know everything, how the human had found her daughter, how she had survived, and what dangers they had faced. But for now, in that quiet, starlit forest, there was only relief and a sense of safety. The queen understood that her journey was only beginning, that questions and challenges still awaited. Yet she also understood that hope could be found in unexpected places, and that courage and compassion could bridge worlds that had seemed so different. The first step had been taken. Her daughter was safe, and the human who had returned her was someone she could trust. The queen resolved to learn more, to understand this human, and to ensure that her daughter never faced such fear again. As they began the journey back to the palace, the queen felt a mixture of awe and curiosity. She had met beings from other worlds before, but none like this, and she knew deep in her heart that this encounter would change not only her life but the life of her kingdom in ways she could not yet imagine. The human had never imagined that his life would lead him to such a place. He had grown up on a quiet, ordinary planet, where days were measured by routine and nights by the soft glow of familiar stars. He had a simple life, working with his hands, helping those around him, and dreaming quietly of adventures he thought he might never have. Yet the universe has a way of calling even the most ordinary person to extraordinary events, and he had answered that call without fully realizing it. It all began when he had been traveling near a remote border, far from any settled land. He was exploring, curious about the legends of strange beings and distant worlds, following trails that most would ignore. He had learned to read the signs of the environment, the subtle marks on trees, the disturbed soil, the broken branches that hinted at movement. It was during such a journey that he noticed something unusual, tiny footprints that were not his own, leading deeper into the wild forests. He followed them cautiously, his heart beating with anticipation, yet he felt no fear, only determination to discover what had happened. Soon, he came upon her, the child who had wandered away, frightened and alone. She had been trying to hide, crouched behind a cluster of luminous plants, her small hands covering her face. Her eyes, wide and scared, looked up at him with a mixture of hope and fear. She could barely speak, her voice trembling as she whispered, I can't find my mom." The human knelt down, speaking in soft, calm tones. "It's all right. I'll help you. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." Gaining her trust was not simple. She had been alone for some time, frightened by strange creatures and unfamiliar sounds. She had learned to be cautious, to rely only on herself, and now a stranger approached her. But there was something in his presence, his calm voice, his gentle gestures that reassured her. Slowly she allowed him to take her hand. She felt the warmth of his hand and a sense of safety she had not felt since her disappearance. Step by step, they began moving through the forest, carefully navigating paths that were rough and unfamiliar. The human faced many challenges on that journey. The forest was alive with creatures he had never seen before, some curious, others potentially dangerous. He used his wits and knowledge of survival, moving quietly, avoiding unnecessary risks, and keeping the child close to him at all times. He spoke to her in gentle tones, telling her stories, distracting her from fear and helping her stay calm. "Look at the glowing flowers," he would say, pointing out the luminous plants that lit their path. "They are beautiful, aren't they? Just like stars on the ground." She looked up at him with a small smile, her trust in him growing with each careful step. Hours passed, yet the human did not tire. He knew that every moment was precious. The child's safety depended on him, and he would not fail her. When they encountered obstacles, fallen trees, rushing streams, steep hills, he found clever ways to overcome them. Sometimes he would carry her, sometimes he would guide her hand, and sometimes he would encourage her to step carefully, teaching her to move with confidence despite her fear. In these moments, a bond formed between them, unspoken but powerful. The child began to see him not just as a rescuer but as someone she could rely on, a protector in an unknown world. As night approached, the forest grew darker and more mysterious. Sounds that had been faint in daylight now seemed louder, echoing through the trees. The human remained alert, listening carefully for any signs of danger. He used a small light device, casting soft illumination on the path ahead without frightening the child or drawing unwanted attention. They stopped occasionally to rest, and the child leaned against him, tired but trusting. "Are we going the right way?" she asked softly. He nodded reassuringly. "Yes. We're almost there. Just a little further." He thought often about the queen, the child's mother. He had heard whispers of the alien kingdom, stories of a ruler wise and fair, and he knew that returning the child to her would be more than just a duty. It would be a moment of truth and relief for someone who had every reason to worry. That thought gave him strength, pushing him to continue despite fatigue. His determination was not driven by reward or recognition, only by the knowledge that he was doing what was right. Each step he took was guided by responsibility and compassion, Along the way, the human also reflected on his own life. He had always wondered what courage truly meant, and now he understood in ways he could never have imagined. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite fear, choosing to act when hesitation could mean harm to others. Protecting the child required both strength and wisdom, and he realized that ordinary people, even those from distant worlds, could rise to extraordinary challenges when they acted from the heart. At one point, they came to a narrow canyon. The child's eyes widened in fear as she looked down at the drop below. The human knelt beside her, holding her hands and speaking softly. "We can do this together. Step slowly, trust me, and I will not let you fall." He guided her carefully, counting steps, ensuring that every movement was safe. When they reached solid ground, she looked up at him with a mixture of awe and relief. "Thank you," she whispered. The human smiled gently, patting her shoulder. "You're brave. Very brave." By the time dawn approached, the two had traveled far, but the human refused to stop until he was certain the child was completely safe. His energy seemed endless, fueled by purpose and compassion. He found shelter in a small clearing where they could rest and regain strength, and kept a careful watch through the early morning hours. The child slept in short bursts, comforted by his presence, and he remained vigilant, knowing that danger could appear at any moment. He prepared simple food and water for her, speaking quietly so as not to disturb her rest. When the first light of morning touched the horizon, the human could see signs of civilization in the distance. He guided the child toward them, his heart lifting with hope. Somewhere beyond those trees, her mother waited, unaware of the journey that had unfolded overnight. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, wondering how the queen would react, and whether the child would recognize her immediately. Still, he pressed forward, determined to complete the mission he had begun. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest, where the alien queen had come to meet them. The queen's presence was overwhelming yet comforting. The child ran toward her mother, crying out in joy, and the queen caught her with open arms. The human watched quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment that he had never known. He had done what he could, and the results were visible in the happiness and relief on their faces. The bond between mother and child was restored, and he had been a bridge that made it possible. The queen approached him, her eyes filled with gratitude and respect. She bowed slightly, acknowledging his bravery and selflessness. "You have returned my daughter safely," she said. "For that, you have my deepest thanks." The human, feeling both humble and proud, simply nodded. He had not sought recognition. The reward was in the child's safety, in seeing her smile once more. The queen's words, however, warmed him, affirming that his actions mattered beyond measure. In the days that followed, the human stayed nearby as the queen and her daughter reunited fully. He shared stories of the journey, explaining the challenges they had faced and the ways they had overcome them. The child's eyes sparkled as she recounted her experiences, and the queen listened intently, her heart filled with gratitude and admiration. The human had not only returned the child safely, but had also shown qualities of courage, patience, and kindness that inspired everyone who learned of his actions. By the time the queen returned to her palace, she had made a quiet decision. This human, so different from her people, had proven his character and bravery. She would not forget him, and she would ensure that the bond formed through this journey was honored. For the human, life would eventually return to its ordinary rhythm, but he carried with him the memory of the forest, the child, and the moments of courage that defined him. That journey, ordinary at first glance, had transformed him, showing the extraordinary potential of compassion and determination. The human had faced unknown dangers, guided a frightened child through unfamiliar lands, and emerged with his purpose fulfilled. He had learned that heroism could come from anyone, regardless of origin, and that acts of kindness could bridge worlds that seemed far apart. He had met the alien queen and her daughter not as a stranger, but as a protector, a friend, and a witness to the enduring power of courage. The memory of their reunion, and the joy in the child's eyes, would stay with him forever. a reminder that even in the vast universe, one person's actions can make a world of difference. The Queen's arrival in the humans' world was nothing short of extraordinary. She had traveled across vast distances, her sleek craft cutting through the skies like a silver arrow, leaving trails of light in its wake. The landscapes below were foreign, unlike the floating islands and luminous forests of her homeland. Rolling hills, deep rivers, and dense woods stretched endlessly, dotted with simple structures that housed humans like the one who had rescued her daughter. Every detail was fascinating, every sight a reminder that the universe held countless wonders beyond her imagination. When she finally stepped from her craft onto the soft ground, the Queen felt a mix of awe, caution, and curiosity. Her presence immediately commanded attention. Even the local wildlife seemed to sense her otherworldly nature. Her eyes, bright and sharp, took in everything: the way the trees swayed in the wind, the scent of the earth, the distant sounds of human activity. This world was different from her own, yet there was a simple beauty in its familiarity and rhythm. She moved gracefully, her steps deliberate, careful not to disturb the balance around her. The human, who had spent days navigating difficult terrain and protecting her daughter, was surprised to see such a majestic figure appear in the clearing. His eyes widened, a mixture of shock and respect washing over him. He had expected perhaps an envoy or a small delegation, but not the Queen herself, radiating calm authority and strength. Yet he did not falter. He had learned to face challenges with steadiness and clarity, and he had already proven to himself that courage was not about size or power, but about action and heart. For a moment they simply observed each other. The Queen noted the human's composed demeanor, his attentive posture, and the gentle way he interacted with her daughter. He was not boastful, nor did he act as if he had done something extraordinary. To him, he had only done what anyone would do in his place: help someone in need. The Queen, however, could see the depth of his bravery and the purity of his intentions. She recognized that heroism often wore humble forms, and that sometimes the greatest courage was quiet and unassuming. The child ran forward first, unable to contain her excitement. She leaped into her mother's arms, crying out, "Mom, you're here." The Queen held her tightly, feeling the warmth and softness of her daughter's embrace, the familiar heartbeat that reassured her more than words ever could. She looked at the human, her eyes meeting his, and in that glance was a silent acknowledgement of gratitude. He had returned her daughter safely, guided her through unknown dangers, and brought her home. Words seemed insufficient to express the Queen's feelings. Finally she spoke, her voice calm yet carrying a weight of authority. "You have done what many would not dare," she said. The human bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he had learned in his own world, though it seemed almost unnecessary in front of someone so regal. "I only did what I thought was right," he replied simply. The Queen's eyes softened. His humility, combined with his courage, made her trust him even more. Trust, she knew, was not given lightly, especially across worlds so different from her own. The Queen observed the interaction between the human and her daughter. It was clear that a bond had formed during the days of their journey. The child, though still recovering from the fear and uncertainty she had faced, seemed calm and secure with the human. She smiled at him, sometimes seeking his reassurance, and he responded with gentle words and patient guidance. The Queen realized then the depth of this connection. Here was someone who had risked everything not for reward, but simply to protect and care. That was a lesson worth remembering, one that transcended worlds, species, and differences. As they began to talk, cultural differences became apparent. The Queen spoke in her native language, melodic and flowing, and the human listened carefully, trying to understand through gestures and the few words he had learned. They exchanged explanations slowly, step by step, bridging the gap between their worlds. The Queen was patient, knowing that understanding took time, and she observed the human carefully, noting his intelligence, adaptability, and willingness to listen. These qualities, she realized, were as important as bravery itself. The human explained the journey in simple words, recounting how he had found the child, the obstacles they had faced, and the methods he had used to keep her safe. He spoke without embellishment, focusing on facts and experiences, not seeking praise. The queen listened intently, her expression one of admiration and curiosity. She asked questions not to test him, but to understand the choices he had made and the challenges he had overcome. Each answer revealed more about his character: patience, courage, empathy, and a natural sense of responsibility. Meanwhile, the child spoke in bursts, recalling moments from the journey that had been both frightening and exciting. She told her mother about the glowing flowers, the rushing streams, and the way the human had always been there to guide her. The queen smiled as she listened, realizing that her daughter had learned important lessons in resilience and trust. Even through fear, she understood that this journey, though difficult, had strengthened her child in ways that mere protection could never achieve. The queen decided to walk among the forest paths with the human, observing the terrain and the challenges he had faced. She noted the narrow passages, the steep inclines, and the obstacles that would have discouraged many. Her respect for him grew with every step. "You navigated this land with skill and care," she said. "It is not an easy place for anyone unfamiliar with it." The human shrugged modestly. "I did my best," he said. "I could not leave her behind." The queen nodded, understanding that courage often meant putting the needs of others above one's own fears and limitations. During their conversation, the queen also learned about human life, its simplicity, its rhythms, and the ways humans relied on one another. She found it fascinating that, despite their lack of advanced technology compared to her own people, humans displayed resilience, ingenuity, and compassion in ways that often exceeded expectations. The human she met embodied these qualities fully, and she felt a quiet admiration for the strength of character that existed across worlds. As the day progressed, the queen invited the human and her daughter to share a meal. It was a simple act, yet one filled with meaning. Sitting together, they exchanged stories and laughter, building a sense of connection and mutual respect. The queen observed the child's joy, the way she responded to the human's gentle humor and kindness, and she understood that trust and friendship had formed naturally. These bonds, she realized, were more powerful than any decree or order, more enduring than any formal alliance. The queen also noticed subtle gestures that revealed the human's patience and attentiveness. He ensured the child ate well, guided her gently through unfamiliar customs, and remained humble in the presence of someone so powerful. These qualities impressed her deeply. Leadership, she reflected, was not only about command or authority, it was about understanding, compassion, and the ability to act rightly when it mattered most. The human, in his quiet way, had demonstrated this without even realizing it. By evening, the queen took a moment to reflect. She had come expecting uncertainty, perhaps conflict, or at least the need to assert authority. Instead, she found respect, courage, and a deep sense of trust. The human had shown her that heroism was not defined by titles, power, or lineage, but by action and heart. She felt a renewed sense of hope, not only for her daughter's safety but for the possibility of connection across worlds. Perhaps, she thought, the universe was full of beings willing to act with kindness, even when it was difficult or dangerous. As night fell, the queen prepared to return to her craft with her daughter, but she asked the human to accompany them, for a time. She wanted to understand more about him, to learn from his experiences, and to show that trust could be extended beyond initial appearances. Together, they walked under the stars, talking quietly about challenges, lessons, and hopes for the future. The child, now smiling and laughing, ran ahead, occasionally looking back to ensure the human was nearby. It was a simple scene, yet profoundly moving. A family reunited, a hero acknowledged, and a queen discovering the depth of courage and compassion in a world so different from her own. The queen realized that this meeting was only the beginning. There were questions to ask, bonds to strengthen, and understanding to build. She knew that her people would want to hear about the human's actions, about the bravery and care that had saved her daughter. She also knew that her daughter had formed a connection that would remain with her, shaping her view of kindness, trust, and courage. And she understood in a quiet, profound way that even across worlds, beings could connect through shared values, empathy, and respect. By the time they returned to the clearing near her craft, the queen felt a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. She had seen firsthand what humans were capable of when they acted from the heart. She had witnessed bravery, humility, and patience, qualities that transcended the differences between their worlds. And she had discovered that trust, once earned, could create bonds that nothing could break. She looked at the human with a smile, nodding in acknowledgement. He had proven himself, not through power or status, but through action, integrity, and care. The queen's craft lifted smoothly into the sky, carrying her. After the initial reunion, the alien queen spent more time observing the human and her daughter, seeking to understand the bond that had developed between them. Each moment offered lessons, and she realized that trust was not something declared, it was earned step by step through consistent care and genuine intent. Her daughter now moved confidently in the presence of the human, sometimes holding his hand or leaning against him, clearly comfortable and safe. This comfort surprised the queen. She had feared that her daughter might be hesitant or distant after such a frightening experience, but instead, she had found a quiet strength and trust in the human. The queen invited the human to accompany them on short walks through the surrounding lands. The terrain was familiar to him now, yet every time he led her daughter across narrow paths or over streams, he did so with patience and attentiveness. The queen watched as he guided her child, explaining each step, encouraging confidence, and keeping a careful eye on her safety. What impressed the queen most was his humility. He never acted as if he had done something extraordinary. To him, helping the child was simply what needed to be done. The queen recognized a truth in this. True heroism often requires no applause. The child, meanwhile, shared her experiences openly. She spoke about the nights spent under stars, the strange creatures they had encountered, and the moments when fear had threatened to overwhelm her. The human listened patiently, reassuring her, helping her see the bravery within herself. "You were very strong," he said. "I only guided you. You did all the hard work." The child beamed, proud and reassured. The queen observed this interaction with fascination. She understood that the human had not only ensured physical safety, but had also nurtured emotional courage. That balance of protection and encouragement was rare, and it created bonds that could last a lifetime. As they spent more time together, the queen learned about the human's life and values. He spoke modestly of his background, of his quiet life on a distant planet, and of the lessons he had learned growing up. Lessons about kindness, empathy, and responsibility. These were qualities that the queen valued deeply, and she realized that despite their different worlds, there was common ground in ethics and heart. She could see why her daughter had felt comfortable with him so quickly. Humans and aliens, though physically different, could connect through shared understanding and intention. Over the next few days, the queen began involving the human in simple, daily routines, not out of necessity, but to further build trust and mutual understanding. She invited him to observe her daughter as she learned new skills, explored her environment, and interacted with other young beings. The human offered guidance when appropriate, but remained careful not to dominate the child's experiences. His presence was supportive, quiet, and steady, creating a sense of security for the child that allowed her to explore and learn confidently. The queen also witnessed moments of humor and warmth. The human had a gentle, subtle way of making the child laugh, whether through small jokes, playful gestures, or shared stories. These moments brought a sense of normalcy and joy after the tension and fear of recent days. The queen found herself smiling, seeing her daughter happy, seeing a rare example of a bond that went beyond duty and safety. She realized that the human's care was not transactional, it was genuine, and it resonated deeply with both her and her daughter. In quiet conversations with the human, the queen explored his motives further. She asked how he had felt during the journey, what had driven him to continue despite fatigue and danger, and what lessons he had learned. His answers were honest and unassuming. "I just knew she needed help," he said simply. "I couldn't leave her alone. It wasn't about me. It was about doing the right thing." The Queen reflected on his words. Integrity, she realized, could shine brightest when it was unnoticed, when it was expressed not for reward or recognition, but because it was right. As the days passed, the Queen began to see her daughter grow in confidence and independence. Guided by the gentle encouragement of the human, she was no longer afraid of small challenges or new experiences. She asked questions freely, explored new areas, and approached unfamiliar situations with curiosity rather than fear. The human had not only returned her safely, but he had also helped her grow emotionally, teaching lessons that the Queen herself could not have imparted so effectively in such a short time. The Queen also observed the ways the human handled unforeseen challenges. When small disagreements arose, either with the child or minor obstacles in their surroundings, he remained calm, thinking carefully before acting, and always prioritizing safety and understanding. He taught the child problem-solving skills, resilience and patience, all without overt instruction, but through example and guidance. These moments were subtle yet profound, demonstrating the human's quiet wisdom and thoughtfulness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Queen and the human walked together while her daughter played nearby. The Queen spoke softly, reflecting aloud on what she had witnessed. "I have seen many beings in my life," she said, "but few possess courage and patience in such a natural way. You do not seek reward, yet you act with bravery and compassion. This is rare and it is extraordinary." The human shook his head modestly. "I only did what I could," he said. "I was scared at times, but I knew I had to keep going. She needed someone to be steady, and that was enough." The Queen understood then that trust had been fully established. Not only had the human demonstrated courage and skill, but he had also shown empathy, patience, and integrity, qualities that created bonds beyond fear or obligation. She felt a deep respect for him, recognizing that their worlds, though so different, could be connected through shared values and mutual understanding. She also realized that her daughter had learned lessons that could not be taught through lectures or rules. They were lessons of the heart, embodied in the actions of someone she trusted and admired. The child, now fully at ease, often sought the human's presence not out of necessity but out of genuine affection. She laughed with him, asked for guidance, and sometimes simply walked beside him in comfortable silence. The Queen watched these interactions closely, noting how natural and unforced they were. The bond that had developed was not temporary. It had the foundations of trust, understanding, and shared experience that would last long into the future. In the private conversations, the Queen expressed her admiration to the human. "You have done more than return my daughter," she said. "You have taught her courage, patience, and trust. You have helped her grow in ways that I cannot fully express." The human smiled gently. "It was easy," he replied. "She is brave. I only helped her see that." The Queen nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his humility. True heroism, she reflected, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and steadfast. By the end of this period, the Queen had made an important decision. She wanted to honor the human not as a visitor or an acquaintance, but as someone worthy of recognition in her world. She realized that courage and compassion could exist anywhere, across any boundary, and that such qualities deserved respect. She also understood that her daughter had formed a bond that would stay with her forever, shaping her understanding of trust, courage, and empathy. The Queen began preparing to return to her homeland, confident in the safety and well-being of her daughter. She invited the human to accompany them, offering him a chance to experience her world fully and to be recognized for his bravery. He accepted, curious and cautious, eager to see the lands he had only heard about in stories. Together, they prepared for the journey, their bond strengthened by days of shared experiences, lessons, and understanding. As they departed, the Queen reflected on the unexpected paths that had led her here. A human, unknown and distant, had risked everything to protect her child. Through patience, courage, and humility, he had earned her trust and respect. She realized that connections between worlds were possible, founded not on power or decree but on shared values, empathy, and action. And most importantly, she knew that her daughter was safe, confident, and stronger because of the experiences they had shared. The journey back to the Queen's homeland was long, but it was filled with quiet moments of reflection, conversation, and understanding. The human traveled alongside the Queen and her daughter, observing the beauty and complexity of her world. The skies were painted in colors he had never seen, and the landscapes, floating islands, and luminous flora were unlike anything on his planet. He marveled silently, realizing that the universe held wonders far beyond his imagination. Yet he also understood that the most remarkable wonder of all was the bond he had helped nurture, the trust between a mother and child, and the respect he had earned from the Queen. During the journey, the Queen explained her world, its history, customs, and values. The human listened attentively, asking questions and offering observations from his own experiences. Though their worlds were different, they found common ground in their understanding of courage, responsibility, and empathy. The Queen marveled at how someone from such a distant place could grasp these concepts so intuitively. She recognized that actions, more than words, revealed true character, and he had demonstrated this fully in the safety and care of her daughter. The child, now confident and joyful, often ran ahead or explored her surroundings, occasionally glancing back to ensure the human was nearby. She had grown emotionally stronger through their shared journey, learning courage, patience, and trust. She laughed freely, shared stories, and asked questions, revealing a newfound curiosity about the world and the people around her. The human responded gently, guiding her when needed, answering questions honestly, and encouraging her to think for herself. Upon returning to the palace, the Queen arranged a formal welcome for the human. Courtiers, advisors, and other dignitaries gathered to witness the arrival of someone who had shown extraordinary bravery. The human, humble as ever, remained quiet, allowing the Queen and her daughter to take center stage. Yet even in his silence, his actions spoke volumes. He had returned her child safely, nurtured her courage, and earned the respect of one of the most powerful beings in the universe. The Queen presented him with honors befitting his deeds, not as a ruler bestowing titles, but as a mother expressing gratitude. She described the journey, the courage, and the care he had demonstrated, emphasizing the lessons learned and the bonds formed. The human accepted quietly, aware that recognition was secondary to the importance of his actions. He had done what he had done because it was right, not for praise or reward. In the following days, the human explored the Queen's kingdom, learning about her culture, traditions, and values. He saw how her people lived, how they cared for one another, and how courage and compassion were woven into daily life. He shared stories of his own world, offering perspectives that fascinated the Queen and her advisors. Through this exchange, mutual respect and understanding deepened, creating connections that spanned worlds and generations. The child remained at the center of attention, her bond with the human visible and strong. She often sought his guidance, laughed at his stories, and clung to his presence when curious or unsure. The Queen observed this bond with pride and gratitude, understanding that trust and kindness had been strengthened through shared experience. She realized that the human had not only protected her daughter, but had also enriched her understanding of courage, compassion, and friendship. As time passed, the Queen reflected on the lessons of this extraordinary journey. She had witnessed heroism in its purest form, not through power or force, but through patience, humility, and action. She had seen that courage could bridge worlds, that empathy could create bonds stronger than any law, and that trust once earned could endure across distances and differences. She understood that the human's actions had shaped her daughter's growth and had inspired her people, demonstrating that true bravery often came quietly, yet left a lasting impact. The human, too, reflected on his experiences. He had faced challenges, guided a frightened child, and navigated an unknown world. Yet he had emerged with understanding, respect, and a sense of fulfillment. He realized that courage was not always grandiose. that heroism could be quiet and steadfast, and that compassion could transform lives. He had seen firsthand how one person's actions could affect the course of events in ways far greater than expected. The Queen and her daughter spent time with him, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. The bonds they had formed continued to grow, rooted in shared experience, trust, and respect. The human's presence became a symbol of courage, humility, and friendship, reminding all who met him that the universe was filled with beings capable of extraordinary kindness. Finally, the Queen called her daughter to her side, holding her close as she spoke. "You have learned much," she said softly. "You have seen courage, patience, and trust in ways few ever experience. Remember these lessons, and carry them in your heart always." The child nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. She looked at the human, smiling warmly. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." The human smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You were brave," he replied. "I only helped you see it." The Queen turned to him, her expression one of deep respect. "You have shown me and my daughter what true courage and compassion are. You have crossed worlds to protect life, to nurture growth, and to teach lessons that will endure. For this you have my eternal gratitude." The human bowed respectfully, humbled and honored, aware that his journey had created ripples far beyond his own understanding. As the sun set over the Queen's homeland, casting golden light across the crystal towers and floating gardens, the Queen, her daughter, and the human stood together, united by trust, courage, and friendship. The journey had begun with fear and uncertainty, but it ended with understanding, admiration, and bonds that transcended worlds. They had learned from one another, grown together, and discovered that even the smallest acts of courage could create ripples that touched lives across the universe. The human eventually returned to his own world, carrying with him memories, lessons, and a sense of fulfillment unlike any he had known. The Queen and her daughter continued their lives, enriched by the experience, forever changed by the bravery, humility, and compassion of a being from another world. And though worlds separated them, the bonds they had formed would endure, a testament to the power of courage, trust, and kindness, showing that the universe, vast and mysterious as it was, held connections that could never be broken.